Welcome to a video. Today I thought I would share with you some of the things that I cooked for my family of 7 this week. So to start off, I had some ground beef. I believe this is a pound that was thawed in my refrigerator. I think this was like already 5:30 or something. I hadn't really planned ahead, but this is a dish that I make, some variation of pretty often. So the base is ground beef, and I kind of add Southwest seasoning. So that's onion powder, garlic powder, smoked paprika, cumin, chili powder, and salt. And then I saute that up. And my youngest son got me this, I don't know what you call it, like meat separator for Christmas. And I absolutely love it. I think he got it at the dollar store. It's been great. It's almost, the little spokes are almost sharp, and it does a really, really, really good job of breaking up the ground beef into kind of finer crumbles, if you will. So next, I have about 8 ounces of Monterey Jack cheese, and I'm just grating that up real quickly. After the ground beef is cooked through, I'm going to add that in. And then here I've got a package of Bob's Red Mill gluten-free cornbread mix, which I think is delicious. I grew up with my mom making Jif cornbread from maybe it's Jiffy. I think it's Jiffy. I don't know. But it's in these little cardboard boxes, and she made those. And that's not gluten-free, but I feel like this is a really nice gluten-free alternative. It's slightly sweet. So I'm going to mix that up according to the package directions. I just add oil, eggs, milk. And then here I'm adding to the ground beef that's been cooked red enchilada sauce, a can of black beans, a can of diced green chilies. They're not spicy at all, but they do add a little hint of smoky, I guess slightly spicy, tangy flavor. And then I'm adding in that block of Monterey Jack cheese, which was so good. Now, I'm also adding in some frozen corn, I think maybe like a cup or two. If I were going to make this recipe again, I think it would be nice to double the amount of this base kind of portion of this skillet dish. So like 2 pounds of ground beef and 2 cans of enchilada sauce and 2 cans of black beans. And then instead of pouring this cornbread mixture over top, I would probably scoop it with like a muffin scoop, so that it was almost like a little bit more dumpling-like. Because after I cooked this, I realized that a lot of the cornbread kind of like sunk down in the middle. I think another way to prevent this would also be to reduce the enchilada sauce, so that the bottom part of this dish wasn't quite so liquidy. So anyways, I had some ripe bananas, and I've recently just been in the mood for a peanut butter banana smoothie. So I'm just peeling my ripe bananas, and then I find it's really helpful to get a smooth smoothie, to just break the banana into pieces before I freeze it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm getting that ready right now, and then I'll freeze it overnight, and it'll be ready for making a smoothie in the morning. I love to use the slider Ziploc bags. I think that they're so convenient, and it's easy for kids to use. I feel like as long as the power lies with me, I want to make food storage accessible to the kids so that they can be independent and help themselves. So here I've got some little dollops of sweetened vanilla whipped cream that I had previously frozen, and now that they're solid and set up, I'm just transferring them to a Ziploc bag, and then I'll stick those back in the freezer. And that's great for just having really quick desserts available. For instance, my oldest daughter had a friend over at last minute, and they ate some of the skillet kind of ground beef cornbread mix for dinner. And then I didn't really have anything to offer them dessert, so I just said, hey, would you like some frozen blueberries with whipped cream on top? And so I was able to just pour blueberries from the freezer and then top it with a couple of those dollops of the frozen whipped cream, and then they had kind of an instant dessert. So I hope you try this recipe. It's one of those that's super flexible and you can really use whatever is in your pantry. If you don't have enchilada sauce, like diced tomatoes would be good in this. Salsa would be really good in this. And if you want to add, chopped up onions and garlic and bell pepper, that would be delicious. If I had that, I would add it. Although some of my family members are a little bit picky, so sometimes it's best to not add too many vegetables. So then I just serve this with some lettuce, some tomatoes, some sour cream, and some salsa. So now it's the next morning, and I'm making a big smoothie. So far I've got those frozen bananas, some whole milk, and some natural peanut butter. This is also incredibly delicious with chocolate milk. You could even do like half chocolate milk and half plain milk, but that takes it to a whole nother level. And then I also add a couple hefty scoops of ice. I'm kind of in this phase of pregnancy where I'm chewing a lot of ice, which I know is not good for my teeth, but when I blend up the ice, I feel like it's small enough that it's probably not going to cause any damage, and then I get to start eating ice at breakfast, which is, again, maybe not a good thing, but it's kind of satisfying, a very specific craving I'm having. Then I also made myself some pour-over coffee. I'm using something called the Kalita Wave, which I think is the easiest way to make incredibly delicious, rich, robust coffee that isn't like too acidic. Sometimes I feel like with French press coffee, it doesn't sit that well in my stomach, but I really love the pour-over coffee. This was a very liquid, heavy breakfast, and I had plans later to go on a walk with two of my closest friends, and fortunately we were walking by a library because as a result of this breakfast, a bathroom stop was quite necessary. So it's the next night, and I hadn't planned ahead. I didn't have any meat thawed out in the refrigerator, so I did what I often do in this situation, which is make breakfast for dinner. So I got out a half-sheet pan, I lined it with parchment paper, I opened a package of bacon, I think it was a 1-pound package, and then I spread them out on the pan, put them in the oven at 350, and let that bake while I mixed up a batch of pancake batter. So this is based on a very loose recipe that a friend of mine shared with me, and basically it's butter, baking powder, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt. I used brown sugar because I thought I was out of sugar, but later I found some more in my pantry, lo and behold. And then my friend, her recipe uses buttermilk. I didn't have any, but I've found a really good substitution is to use a combination of Greek yogurt and milk to kind of make up the volume of liquid buttermilk. Then I added in a few eggs, and then I alternated adding King Arthur measure for measure gluten-free flour with milk. So I would like add some flour, whisk that in, add some milk, whisk that in, add some flour, add some milk, and then I just cooked that in a preheated skillet in some butter. And I feel like this recipe always turns out. No one complains when I add chocolate chips. Sometimes it's also fun to add a little bit of almond extract in addition to the vanilla. I don't think I mentioned, but I did add vanilla. But sometimes it's fun to add almond extract and sprinkles, and that gives the pancakes a birthday cake kind of flavor, which is nice for a change. And then when I'm serving breakfast for dinner, I always like when I have some fruit to serve on the side. So I went down in our basement refrigerator and I found that we had like an enormous bag of navel oranges. So I brought those up and put them in a colander, rinsed them, and then I just sliced them up and served them alongside the pancakes and the bacon. And this was definitely a crowd-pleasing dinner. It always tends to be. Of course, I added butter and maple syrup to the pancakes. I'm always concerned that my family might suffer from a butter deficiency, so I remedy that by applying liberal amounts of butter whenever possible. Here, some of my family is playing the game Spot It while I'm finishing up making dinner. This is a really fun game It's one of those that you open and you can pretty much play right away. It doesn't take a long time to learn the rules. So it's the next morning, and my middle son requested a smoothie, so we kind of just dug around in the fridge and freezer for whatever we had. So we came up with strawberries, cherries, and then this really delicious yogurt. I don't know if everyone has it at their grocery store. The brand is called Greek Gods. So I think this was the cherry Greek Gods. So we added several hefty scoops of that, and then I'm adding some whole milk. And then we blended it up and had that, and it was really, really good. That was a crowd pleaser. Not everyone in my family loves cherries in their smoothies because it's hard to get them 100% blended, so like sometimes there'll be little bits of skin, which doesn't bother me at all if they're small enough. But the baby liked the smoothie. She was a big fan. Then whenever I have leftover smoothie, I'll just pour it into a glass and then cover it with saran wrap and stick it in the freezer. And inevitably, someone will like to have it for a snack or for a quick breakfast later in the week. So next, I'm moving on to a recipe that the same friend who gave me that pancake recipe taught me. So over COVID, when there was lockdown, our families kind of decided to make exceptions for each other, and we would trade cooking with each other at each other's house. So like 1 week would be at my friend's house, and she would come up with the menu, and it would be something that her family really liked, and she taught me how to make it, and we make a double batch. And so I would take my half home, and our boys would play together, and then when we got home we would eat the meal. So it was so much fun because I got to spend time with my friend, and I got to learn how to cook something new, and our boys got to play together. It was kind of a lifesaver during that time. So her recipe is a little different. I kind of have adapted it to my family, but I'm starting off here with chopping up a few cloves of garlic and adding that into my measuring dish here. And then I'm bringing over some red pepper flake. I don't use a ton because our 2-year-old is kind of sensitive to spice. And then I'm adding gluten-free soy sauce, which is not super salty. So if you were using regular soy sauce, I would probably not use this much. I used about a cup. And then I added almost a cup of brown sugar. So this is definitely a sweet and savory kind of sauce. And then I'm also going to add some arrowroot because you could definitely use cornstarch. That's what my friend uses. And I do often use cornstarch to thicken this up. But I was out. But I would like to point out that you should do this in the opposite order that I did it. So start off with your arrowroot in the bottom of your measuring cup and then whisk in your soy sauce, because otherwise you'll end up with some lumps, which is what I ended up with. But that was okay. I fished them out and it was all right. So next, while I'm kind of going, I'm in the groove, I'm mixing up a marinade for some chicken breast that has been defrosted. So this is actually going to be for dinner the next night, but this marinade needs 24 hours to just fully infuse the chicken with flavor. So I've got olive oil, apple cider vinegar, parsley, a good amount of salt, and then you can add seasoned salt, or instead, since I didn't have seasoned salt, I added a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of onion powder, and a teaspoon of celery flake. Then you add a teaspoon of marjoram, some rosemary, some paprika, and some black pepper. And then you marinate it at least overnight, but especially if you're using dark meat, you can marinate this for like 2 days and it just becomes more and more delicious. And then I highly recommend grilling this particular kind of chicken. In my family, we call this Bob's chicken because my grandpa, Robert, he was called Bob, this was kind of like his signature dish. And as kids, we would often go over to my grandparents' house Sundays after church, and we would get out of our car and immediately smell the wonderful, enticing aroma of Bob's chicken grilling. And I remember seeing my grandpa out there standing over his charcoal Weber grill, diligently keeping an eye on the chicken. And I feel like for this particular recipe, the more color that you get on the chicken as you grill it, the better. he often would get bone-in, skin-on, like drumsticks and thighs and chicken breast, and then he would peel off the skin and then keep the bone in. And I think that did make for an extra delicious chicken. So if you ever want to go to that trouble, it's worth it. But sometimes I will sacrifice that extra like 3% of deliciousness for the 30% of efficiency. So I just used boneless, skinless chicken breast. So next, I'm going to be thinly slicing, I would say about a 1/4 inch thick slices of flank steak. And this is what I'm going to use to make the Mongolian beef. So I slice it 1/4 inch slices, and then I get my skillet going pretty hot, and then I'll add a little bit of oil and cook it up. So here I'm sprinkling a little bit of arrowroot starch over the sliced flank steak. You can definitely use cornstarch, and you can also put it all in a Ziploc bag and shake it up together. I always feel kind of like wasteful using a Ziploc bag just for meat and then throwing it away. So I thought I already got my cutting board dirty, so why don't I just sprinkle the starch right on the meat and mix it up with my hands. So next I'm heading over to my pressure cooker, and I'm just adding equal parts water and rice to the bottom, and then I put the lid on. I put it to like the sealing mode, and then I cook it on high pressure for 4 minutes. So over at our preheated skillet, my daughter and I are adding some avocado oil, and then we kind of tip the pan all around to spread it out. And then I kind of added just like one big clump of sliced flank steak right into the middle of the pan. It does seem to want to stick together when I use cornstarch and arrowroot on it. So then I kind of have to individually separate each piece. But it only takes a couple minutes. It's not a big deal. So I have this on high heat, and the idea is to get some nice color on both sides, and then get it into that glass dish over there, that pie plate, and then I'll repeat with the remaining batches. I don't want to overcrowd the pan because then I feel like it steams and it can get maybe a little bit tough, and it also doesn't get that nice like flavor from getting that brown color on it. So I'd prefer to do it in a few batches and have the meat kind of spread out on the skillet than to dump it all in and try to do it all at once. It does take more time, so that's something to consider. It's not the quickest way to cook meat in the entire world, but it is delicious. And I always like to make extras because this is one of the best leftover meals that I have ever had. So that dinner I showed you earlier, that was like the ground beef and the chilies and the enchilada sauce, that's really delicious ground over. I packed that for our co-op the next day, and I just reheated it in the microwave, and when I brought it to the table, caught the eye of several people, and they thought it looked yummy, and I was happy to tell them that the taste matched how it appeared. So anyways, this Mongolian beef is really delicious. Now, I wish that I had had some vegetables to serve alongside this. Often I'll serve it with either roasted or steamed broccoli, but if you had like onions and bell pepper and snap peas or snow peas, that would be really good. Water chestnuts would be a nice addition to this for that kind of like crispy crunchiness. Sliced carrots would also be really good. But I didn't plan ahead very well with my grocery shopping this week, so this is what we have. So I really just served the Mongolian beef with jasmine rice. A nutritionist would not be impressed with the lack of vegetables, but sometimes we do the best that we can, and that's what I did tonight. So now that I've gotten through all of my batches of the Mongolian beef, I'm adding that sauce that I made earlier, which was the red pepper flake, the brown sugar, the gluten-free soy sauce, and that little bit of arrowroot starch. Once it's reduced and it's really thick and syrupy, that's when I add the Mongolian beef and like bring it back up to really hot temperature. And then I serve it over this fluffy jasmine rice. And this is one of those that you're so ready to eat it that you have to remind yourself to slow down and blow on it so you don't burn your mouth. So now it's the next night, and I've decided to make some roasted potato wedges. So I'm just quartering russet potatoes lengthwise, and then I'll drizzle them with melted butter, a lot of salt, some pepper, and some dried parsley. I was kind of in a rush. This seems to be a pattern, but I keep waiting till like 5 o'clock to start dinner. I think maybe because that's when my husband is done with work and he's able to help with the toddler. It's always better if I plan ahead and get started on dinner earlier, but I don't know. I wasn't doing too well with that. So I ended up putting my oven on convection on 425, and that did cook the potatoes pretty quickly. So often I'll add Parmesan cheese and rosemary to these potatoes, and that makes it like infinitely more delicious. But I was worried that the Parmesan would burn since I had the oven set so high, so I ended up just sticking with parsley and black pepper. Oh, I also added some garlic powder. So my husband took those chicken breasts that we made the marinade for, the Bob's chicken, and he's outside grilling those right now while I'm working on the potatoes. So they're just going to go in the oven. I think I did probably like 15 minutes, and then I rotated the pan 180 degrees, put it back in for 15 minutes. So what you're looking for is a golden brown potato. You can always pull the rack out and stick a fork into one of the potatoes, and if the fork goes in without any resistance, then you're done. Again, this dinner probably needed a salad or a green vegetable to go with it, but I still hadn't been to the grocery store, and so I was just making do with what we had in the refrigerator and the pantry and the freezer. I used to buy the frozen broccoli from Costco, and then that would be really nice because I could just kind of steam it really quickly and serve it alongside whatever I was making for dinner. And then for some reason I fell out of the habit of buying it. I think it's because I started going into this like roasted vegetable phase, and I don't find that frozen vegetables roast as well because they just don't seem to get as crispy as if you use fresh vegetables. So I kind of got out of the habit of buying it, but I'm realizing I should probably get back into the habit so that I always have something on hand and I'm not serving 2 meals in a row without a green vegetable. Oh well, there's always room for improvement. I thought I'd make up for it though by adding in some fruit. So here are the oranges, are making another appearance. I believe this was the last of them, so next time I go to the grocery store, I'm going to have to restock because these were immensely popular. I sometimes feel like right now at the stage that my kids are, they're more likely to eat the fruit than they are the vegetables. And I feel ashamed admitting that. I don't have good vegetable eaters. But I feel like, maybe as they get older, they'll continue to become more adventurous. But in the meantime, sometimes I just feel like I'd rather serve what they're going to eat. Anyways, this is what the potatoes looked like, the grilled chicken, and there are those oranges. So we loaded up our plates, and I thought about my Grandpa Bob as we had this meal together. I'm grateful that he taught us how to make this.